All right, let's get right into it. We're going to take a deep dive into one of New York's biggest landlords, Brookfield Properties. And we're not just looking at a few complaints here. We're going to build a case step by step to figure out the absolute maximum financial hit they could be facing. And it all starts with one tenant, one apartment, and one very strange discovery.
So this whole story kicks off not with some big corporate report, but with a single tenant getting a completely insane electricity bill. I mean, can you imagine an extra $700 a month? And it turns out the culprit is an appliance that you thought was turned off. It's just wild.
And get this, 110 degrees. That wasn't the weather outside, that was the temperature of the air blasting out of their air conditioner while it was switched off. The thing was just running non-stop, sucking down power, and, oh yeah, creating a massive fire hazard.
So you see, this one faulty appliance, it's way more than just an inconvenience. It's the spark. It's the single loose thread that, when you pull on it, starts to unravel a huge, tangled story of corporate negligence and, frankly, incredible liability.
Okay, so the problem here is just staggering. It's not just a loud AC unit. It's a fire risk, it's a huge financial drain, and when the tenant asked for it to be replaced, they were refused. But then you get this absolutely stunning admission from a staff member. There's a whole room in the basement filled with these broken units that they just patch up and stick in other people's apartments. That suggests this isn't an accident. It's a known systemic problem.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, one busted AC is bad luck. But a whole building full of them, with a management team that's allegedly recycling broken parts? Well, that starts to look a lot less like bad luck and a lot more like a deliberate pattern of negligence.
And as investigators dug deeper, they found that these faulty air conditioners were really just the tip of the iceberg at the Eugene, one of Brookfield's luxury high-rises. It was one piece of a really disturbing pattern that covered everything from safety and security to the bills tenants were paying.
Yeah, this goes so far beyond bad air conditioners. We're talking about really serious stuff. Allegedly lying to the city and then rushing illegal gas detector installations, a major life safety issue. Trying to bully tenants into signing blank forms to get rid of complaints, and a complete breakdown in security that led to a sexual assault claim. You top all that off with these shady utility bills, and a very clear picture starts to form, one that seems to put protecting the company way ahead of protecting the tenant.
Now, to really grasp how serious some of these allegations are, you got to understand how things are supposed to work. Look at this flowchart. This is the rigorous, multi-agency process required by law for stuff like this. You've got the Department of Buildings, the Fire Department, Con Ed. It's all designed very specifically to keep people safe.
And here's the alleged reality. On one side, you have the city's rulebook, designed for safety. And on the other, you have allegations that Brookfield's management basically threw that rulebook out the window. They allegedly lied to the city about deadlines for things like gas detectors, then rushed illegal installations, completely sidestepping the very protocols meant to prevent a disaster. This really forces you to ask a bigger question. Are these just a bunch of isolated mistakes by a few employees in one building? Or are these the predictable results of a corporate strategy? Is this actually part of the business model?
So let's zoom out. Let's look at the corporate level, because things like this don't just happen in a vacuum. They often seem to be part of a deliberate system, a business model that's pushed from the very top.
And the contrast is pretty stark. On one hand, you read Brookfield's marketing and it's all about sustainability and reliability, but then on the other hand, you've got lawsuits alleging they used software to illegally inflate rents. They promise you this luxury experience, but at the same time, they actually own the submetering company that's sending out those confusing utility bills. That's a huge conflict of interest. You know, the whole strategy seems to boil down to this one concept: information asymmetry. It's simple, really. Brookfield and its partners, they have all the data. They know exactly how the rent is priced, how the utility bill is calculated. And you, the tenant, you just get a number at the end of the month. It's a black box by design. It makes it almost impossible to question anything, and that maximizes their profit.
Okay, so we see the system. Now, let's start talking numbers. Let's actually start putting a price tag on all of this. We're going to build out a liability ledger for Brookfield, starting with the costs we can pin down for just this one building.
First up, $25.1 million. That's just the estimated cost to replace all those faulty, dangerous air conditioning units in one building. We're already talking tens of millions for a single repair job.
Next, $5.3 million. This isn't a guess. This is the actual amount Brookfield agreed to pay to settle their piece of that big RealPage price-fixing lawsuit. This is money that is already out the door.
So you just add up those two items alone for one property, and you're already over $30 million in direct, known liability. And just remember, this doesn't even begin to cover potential city fines, other lawsuits, or rent reductions for tenants. This is literally just the starting point.
But here's the question that really blows this whole thing wide open when we're trying to figure out their maximum liability. What if the Eugene isn't the exception? What if it's the rule?
I mean, it seems pretty unlikely, right? Think about it. Corporate strategies like using specific software to set rents or owning your own utility billing company, those aren't one-building decisions. Those are portfolio-wide policies, which means the same problems found at the Eugene could very likely be happening across their other buildings too.
This is the domino effect, plain and simple. A bad corporate policy doesn't just create a problem in one place. It creates systemic risk that just multiplies and multiplies across every single property where that policy is active. That $30 million from one building, it could be just a tiny fraction of the total. So that brings us to the final calculation. What is the absolute maximum this whole mess could cost Brookfield if these issues really are systemic? To figure that out, we have to pull everything we've uncovered together.
The math here has 4 key parts. First, you start with those direct costs we've already identified, the $30.4 million. Second, you have to add in all the unquantified stuff, city fines, legal fees, maybe massive rent abatements for tenants. Third, you have to account for reputational damage. How many future tenants and investors will they lose over this? And then, the final crucial step. You multiply that whole number across their entire NYC portfolio.
When you run those numbers, you end up with a truly staggering figure, a 9-figure sum. The potential exposure here could easily rocket into the hundreds of millions of dollars. This could be one of the largest potential liabilities for a residential landlord in New York City history, and it's a bill built entirely on a foundation of bad wiring, deceptive software, and what looks like systemic neglect.
Which leaves us with one last big thought. Remember, this whole investigation started with one person and one broken air conditioner. But it ends here, with a potential liability of historic size, and a really fundamental question about the balance of power between a single tenant and a giant corporate landlord in today's world.